Lots of people claim to be management gurus. Our next guest actually has the credentials, not to mention the real-world experience. Bill George is the former CEO of Medtronic, a $47 billion medical devices company, and current professor of management practice at the Harvard Business School. He's also an author, most recently, of this book, 7 Lessons for Leading in Crisis, and he serves on the boards of Goldman Sachs, Exxon, and Novartis. Bill George joins us on set. Bill, great to have you here. The financial crisis exposed more, as you know, more than a few myths about what it takes to be a great leader on Wall Street. What has this experience taught us about what it does take? What are the qualities and attributes to really win in the financial services industry?
Well, I think like any other industry, you have to build a long-term institution with long-term performance. And I think the people got caught short had not done that. They had not built the cash base, they had not built the management base that could withstand very difficult times. They had their risk portfolio way, way too out on the curve.
But they didn't acknowledge that. I mean, Dick Fuld and Stan O'Neill, a couple of names come to mind. I don't even know if you can really honestly throw Chuck Prince into that camp, but they thought that that's what they were doing. What didn't they realize? What was their folly? And what did the other guys like Jamie Dimon say and Lloyd Blankfein, to name a couple of examples, know that Fuld and O'Neill didn't?
Well, they got caught up in the short-term game, and they really put their entire institutions at risk by playing the short-term game and not having adequate cash reserves. If you look at Goldman went into the crisis with $125 billion in cash reserves. Because they've been building that up over the last year. Jamie Dimon did the same thing. He had built a strong balance sheet. He could withstand that crisis. But also, they're looking at long-term institution building and a management team. There was way too much pay in places like Citigroup for short-term performance.
How hard is it to balance the need of the short-term focus, which is often linked to the stock price performance, even the CEO's pocket himself, versus building a long-term enterprise?
I think that's the mark of any good leader. You still have to perform in the short term, but you've got to keep your eyes straight on the ball of how are you building a long-term institution and making the investments for the long term and making sure no matter how bad the crisis, you can weather it.
Let's talk, though, about that in the context of shareholder value. Jack Welch, right, made it a mantra, if you will, for corporate America. But in this post-crisis economy, it doesn't seem as though shareholder value is quite enough for a CEO to try and attain. You know, what beyond the stock price do companies need to try and do right now?
Well, the number one thing they got to do is build customer value. Any company that doesn't do that will be out of business, like General Motors is or was. And so I think you've got to build long-term customer value. You've got to build it today, every day with your customers. And the companies that created great shareholder values have all been customer value creators. The shareholder value doesn't come first. It follows as a result of the work they're doing to build a relationship with the customer.
Well, you mentioned GM, so we have to go there. We heard today that maybe the U.S. taxpayer is going to take a $30 billion hit versus a $44 billion hit on the bailout of these companies. Ed Whitacre, we know you're a fan, but is he really the right person to turn around GM? Can one person do it?
No, one person cannot do it. Ed Whitacre is the right person. He's probably the best person in America to do it. He did it with AT&T when his former Southwestern Bell took him over. Then he took over Bell South.
They're different businesses.
Totally different businesses, but here's a leader. And GM's had a series of financial people for 30 or 40 years and been going steadily downhill, not focusing on cars. Whitaker's not a car guy, but I assure you, he'll get the cars right because he understands that's the essence of the business, to win the customers back.
Do you think it's a little weird, though, that he's sort of Dick Cheneying himself, meaning he's been there to select the CEO, and it seems like he wants that job? Does that put a slight at all on his leadership capabilities?
I haven't talked to him about it. I'm not sure he does want the job. I think I wish he did want the job because I'd like to see him in that job for at least 2 to 3 years. At his stage in his career, he's not going to do it for 5 or 10. But I think it's a perfect time to really get his teeth into the business and make the fundamental changes. Remember how Lou Gerstner did with IBM? It's very similar to that. And Gerstner put on the right track, and then he brought in a guy, insider like Sam Palmisano, to run the business. And look at how IBM's done.
Yeah, but let's be fair. It took a decade to turn around IBM.
It does.
I mean, it was a sea change that Gerstner instigated, the move towards services. You know, but you think back over the period of time it took, is the American public, is the taxpayer really going to be patient enough for that to take place at GM?
No, I think they've got to get out from under the American public. They've got to get out from under the taxpayer. But yes, I think it'll take a decade. Look, it's going to take 4 to decade. Alan Mulally got a 3-year head start. First thing he did, he's in 90 days. What's he do? He understands how to lead in a crisis and anticipate one. He goes to the banks and borrows $23 billion. And as a result of that, he can weather the storm and not come running to the government to bail them out.